Hey there, welcome back to the channel. If you're joining us for the first time, hit that subscribe button because we're diving deep into American automotive history today. Now, picture this. It's 1959 and you're standing on a Pontiac dealer's lot. The chrome gleams in the sun, those twin grills catch your eye, and sitting right there is something Detroit had never quite seen before. A station wagon that could embarrass muscle cars that wouldn't even exist for another 5 years. I'm talking about the 1959 Pontiac Bonneville Safari. Only 4,673 of these machines rolled off the assembly line that year. To put that in perspective, Chevrolet was churning out Impala wagons by the tens of thousands. But Pontiac? They built this thing for people who wanted their family hauler to have teeth. And when I say teeth, I mean up to 345 horsepower worth of tri-power V8 Fury. Today, we're going to tell you the story of how this wagon became the most expensive Pontiac you could buy in 1959, why it scared the folks over at Chevrolet's headquarters, and then, just as suddenly as it appeared, why it seemed to vanish from the roads. Stick around, because this is a story that every true car enthusiast needs to hear. The context: Detroit in 1959. Let's set the stage. 1959 was a watershed year for the American automobile industry. The late 1950s were all about excess, bigger fins, more chrome, and styling that looked like it came straight from a Buck Rogers comic strip. But underneath all that flash, something else was happening. Detroit was locked in a sales war, and the battlefield was your local showroom floor. General Motors dominated the landscape, but within GM, there was an internal pecking order. Chevrolet sat at the bottom as the volume seller, Pontiac was stuck in the middle trying to figure out who it was, and Cadillac ruled the roost at the top. For years, Pontiac had been the old man's car. Conservative, reliable, boring. The kind of car your grandfather drove to church on Sunday. But that changed when a 43-year-old executive named Seaman Bunky Knudsen took over as general manager of Pontiac in 1956. Knudsen was the son of William S. Knudsen, who had been GM's president, so the automobile business was literally in his blood. But Bunky wasn't interested in following his father's conservative playbook. He wanted to shake things up. Knudsen looked at Pontiac's lineup and saw a division going nowhere fast. He looked at the emerging youth market, the post-war generation coming of age with money to spend and a need for speed, and he made a decision that would transform Pontiac forever. This division was going to be about performance. By 1959, Knudsen's plan was bearing fruit. Pontiac would climb to third place in industry sales, a position they'd hold through most of the 1960s. And the 1959 model year was where everything came together: new styling, new engineering, and a new attitude. The wide track revolution. The 1959 Pontiacs represented one of the most radical redesigns Detroit had ever attempted. Everything was new. GM styling chief Bill Mitchell threw out the rulebook, and what emerged was unlike anything that came before. The most important innovation was something called wide track. Now, this wasn't just advertising hype, it was real engineering. Knudsen had noticed that the new wider bodies for 1959 looked awkward sitting on the carried-over 1958 frames. So Pontiac's engineers pushed the wheels 5 inches farther apart, creating a front tread width of 63.7 inches and a rear width of 64 inches. Compare that to other GM products at 61 inches, and you can see the difference. What did this mean on the road? Better handling, less body roll in corners, and a more stable ride at highway speeds. For a full-size car that could weigh over 4,300 pounds, this was revolutionary. The wide-track Pontiac could corner in ways that would embarrass its competitors, and Pontiac made sure everyone knew it. The advertising campaign was brilliant. Wide-track Pontiac became synonymous with performance and handling. Then there was the styling. The The 1959 Pontiac introduced the split grille that would become the division's signature for decades. It almost didn't happen. Legend says designers were frustrated with a conventional full-width grille design, so they cut it in half and swapped the pieces around. What started as an accident became iconic. Twin tail fins jutted out at the rear, lower and longer bodies created a sleeker profile, and glass area increased by 40% thanks to huge windshields and flat-topped roofs on the Vista hardtop sedans. These were dramatic, attention-grabbing cars that announced you'd arrived before you even opened the door. The Bonneville Safari, Pontiac's flagship wagon. In 1959, the Bonneville line expanded dramatically. Previously, it had been limited to sporty convertibles and hardtop coupes, performance cars for people who wanted luxury. But for 1959, Pontiac added a four-door Vista hardtop sedan and, most significantly, the custom Safari station wagon. This wasn't your typical family hauler. The Bonneville Safari was the most expensive Pontiac you could buy in 1959, with a base price of $3,532. To understand what that meant, consider that the average American family earned about $5,000 a year. This wagon cost more than the Bonneville convertible. Let that sink in. The wagon was the price leader. Why? Because Pontiac loaded it with features that made it more luxury car than grocery getter. The interior featured tri-tone Morocide vinyl upholstery in colors that would make a modern designer weep with envy. Walnut veneer trim adorned the dashboard and door panels. Carpeted lower door panels, courtesy lights, a padded dashboard, and a grab bar for the passenger all came standard. But the real story was under that long hood. Every Bonneville came with Pontiac's 389 cubic-inch V8 engine. For 1959, the 389 was new, created by increasing the stroke of the previous 370 to 3.75 inches. The bore measured 4.0625 inches, and with a 10.5.1 compression ratio, this engine was built for power. The base engine produced 260 horsepower with a 4-barrel carburetor. But Pontiac offered something special, the tri-power setup. This consisted of 3 Rochester 2-barrel carburetors arranged in a progressive linkage. At idle and light throttle, only the center carburetor worked. But mash that accelerator and the 2 outboard carbs kicked in, turning that V8 into a fire-breathing monster. With tri-power, the street engine produced 315 horsepower. But there was an even more powerful option, the racing version with the heavy-duty 420A NASCAR-certified block. This beast generated 345 horsepower at 4,800 RPM and 420 pound-feet of torque at 3,200 RPM. Dual exhausts helped those spent gases exit, and the whole package screamed performance. Think about what that meant. This was a station wagon, a family car designed to haul kids, groceries, camping gear, and whatever else American families needed in 1959. Yet it had more horsepower than most sports cars of the era. A Corvette with the base V8 in 1959 made 290 horsepower. Pontiac had built a wagon that could outrun Chevrolet's Halo car. The transmission was GM's Super Hydra-matic 4-speed automatic, a unit that had been around since the late 1930s and was proven to be bulletproof. Power steering, power brakes, and a host of other luxury options were available, and many Safari buyers checked every box. The Safari wagon rode on a 122-inch wheelbase, slightly shorter than the 124-inch span of other Bonnevilles. It measured 214.3 inches long and weighed 4,370 pounds. Those weren't small numbers, but the wide track setup made it feel more agile than it had any right to be. The Chevrolet connection, corporate rivalry. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Within General Motors, there was always competition between divisions. Chevrolet was the volume leader, selling to everyone. Pontiac was supposed to be a step up, appealing to buyers who'd made it a bit further up the ladder. But in 1959, those lines were blurring. Chevrolet's premium offering was the Impala, which had become its own series that year. The Impala Nomad wagon was Chevy's luxury hauler, priced at $3,009, about $500 less than the Bonneville Safari. Chevrolet sold wagons by the trainload. Between all their wagon models, Chevy moved over 188,000 units in 1959. But here's the thing, the Nomad couldn't touch the Safari's performance. Chevrolet's top engine was a 335 horsepower fuel-injected 283 cubic inch V8, impressive for its size, but smaller than Pontiac's 389. And while Chevy wagons were nice, they weren't wearing the Bonneville's luxury appointments or sitting on the wide-track chassis. Reports from the era suggest that Chevrolet dealers were not happy. They had customers walking into showrooms, cross-shopping the Impala against the Bonneville, and some of those customers were willing to pay the extra money for Pontiac's performance edge. For Chevrolet, used to being GM's undisputed champion, this was a problem. Pontiac wasn't supposed to beat Chevrolet. That wasn't how the GM hierarchy worked, but Bunky Knudsen didn't care about corporate protocols. He was building cars that people wanted, and if that upset Chevy, so be it. The rivalry would only intensify through the 1960s, eventually leading to the GTO and the entire muscle car movement. Motor Trend magazine named the entire 1959 Pontiac line Car of the Year. Car Life magazine called the Bonneville Custom the best buy in the $2,000–$3,000 class. The automotive press loved what Pontiac was doing, and so did consumers. The Vanishing Act, why so few survive. So we have this incredible wagon, expensive, powerful, luxurious, and groundbreaking. Only 4,673 were built. Out of a total production of 82,764 Bonnevilles that year, the Safari represented just over 5.6%. It was rare from day one. But here's the tragedy. Almost none of them survived. Today, finding a 1959 Bonneville Safari in any condition is like striking gold. Barn find examples with original paint, and low miles pop up maybe once every few years, and when they do, collectors fight over them. What happened? A few factors conspired to make these wagons nearly extinct. First, they were expensive. The kind of people who could afford a $3,532 station wagon in 1959 drove it. Hard. These weren't garage queens kept under covers. They hauled families on vacation, towed boats to the lake, and racked up serious mileage doing what wagons were supposed to do. Second, they were wagons. In the 1960s, as these cars aged, they became used vehicles. Young families on budgets bought them second-hand and continued to drive them into the ground. By the 1970s, when the collector car hobby was exploding and people were saving Corvettes and muscle cars, nobody was thinking about station wagons. They were viewed as disposable family transportation. Third, rust. The late 1950s were before galvanized steel and modern rust protection. Cars in the northern states faced brutal winters with road salt, and by the mid-1960s, corrosion was eating 1959 Pontiacs alive. Fenders developed bubbles, rockers rotted out, and floors turned into Swiss cheese. Many of these cars were simply junked when the cost to repair exceeded their value, which wasn't much. Fourth, the 1959 body style was polarizing. While some people loved the wild styling, others thought it was too much. By the early 1960s, when Pontiac's styling became cleaner and more refined, the 1959 models looked dated. People weren't sentimental about them yet. They were just old cars. The result is that today, maybe a few dozen well-preserved 1959 Bonneville Safaris exist worldwide. Most of those have been restored from rough condition. Finding one with original paint is almost impossible. They show up at major auctions like Mecum and Barrett-Jackson, where they command strong prices from collectors who understand their significance. In 2025, a well-restored tri-power Safari can bring $50,000 to $75,000, sometimes more if the options list is extensive and the restoration quality is exceptional. Compare that to Chevrolet Nomads from the same year, which are certainly collectible but more common, and you can see the rarity premium at work. Legacy. The performance wagon pioneer. The 1959 Bonneville Safari deserves recognition as a pioneer. It proved that station wagons didn't have to be boring, conservative, or slow. Pontiac showed that you could have your cake and eat it too. Room for 6 people and their luggage, plus enough power to embarrass the hot rods at the stoplight. This philosophy would continue through the 1960s with other performance wagons, though few reached the Safari's combination of luxury and power. The concept would fade in the 1970s as emission controls and fuel economy concerns neutered performance across the board. But in 1959, for one brief shining moment, Pontiac built a wagon that had no equal. The split grille that debuted on these cars would define Pontiac styling for decades. The wide-track engineering became a cornerstone of the division's identity, advertised relentlessly and genuinely, making the cars better. And the performance attitude that Knudsen instilled would carry Pontiac through the golden age of muscle cars. If you ever get a chance to see one of these Safaris in person, especially one equipped with tri-power, take the time to appreciate it. You're looking at a piece of automotive history that nearly disappeared. You're seeing what happens when engineers and designers are allowed to think outside the box, when a division is willing to challenge internal rivals, and when someone decides that boring isn't the only option for family transportation. So there you have it, the story of the 1959 Pontiac Bonneville Safari. The wagon that cost more than a Cadillac Series 62 sedan packed up to 345 horsepower under its hood and made Chevrolet nervous enough that the rivalry would echo through the next decade of American automotive history. Now I want to hear from you. Did any of you ever experience one of these Bonnevilles? Maybe your dad had one, or you remember seeing them on the road? Drop a comment below and share your stories. These community memories help keep these cars alive, even when the vehicles themselves have long since vanished. If you enjoyed this deep dive into automotive history, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. We've got some incredible cars lined up, and trust me, you don't want to miss them. Give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today, and share it with any car enthusiasts you know. The more people who understand these rare pieces of history, the better chance we have of preserving the survivors. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most interesting cars are the ones that got away. Until next time, keep the rubber on the road and the chrome shining.